Hi folks, welcome back to Inktober. Today is day 17. Yes, we're getting there. And the prompt is Dionysus, so let's get on with it.
Hello, folks. So we're here on day 17, and this prompt is one that I was looking forward to because it's Dionysus, who is the god of revelry and wine, and I just thought this was going to be a lot of fun, and it absolutely was. I spent more time on this one than I did on, I think, probably any of the others. Certainly judging by the recording, and I don't think the recording cut out at any point, which is nice. Maybe I'm getting better at making sure things are charged. Anyway, with this one, I really wanted a sense of warmth, and I wanted to get those kind of wine colours in there. So I didn't really plan out the colours I was going to use ahead of time. I just kind of played it by ear, which is a bit dangerous, especially when you spend, 4 or 5 hours on a piece. But I think this one worked, and I had sort of an autumnal colour palette in mind, which turned out pretty well. On here, yeah, so I tested out some different colours for the leaves, and I wanted a range of, not quite a rainbow of colours, but certainly colours that were turning from greens to reds. So along with the colours, I really wanted the whole piece to feel inviting, to feel as though you're sort of in on a secret. So with his expression, I wanted him to be kind of leading you into the picture. The reference picture I used for this was actually a vintage photograph of a woman in a similar kind of pose, but apart from that, I've obviously changed it quite a bit, and made him much more masculine. And yeah, it's, again, you wouldn't be able to tell looking at the reference picture that this was a reference for this piece, which is quite nice from my point of view. I didn't want any of them to be super obvious. Some of them will be more obvious than others, especially when I've taken a pose from a painting that's quite famous. But anyway, I also added the wine goblet here. That wasn't in the photograph. So yeah, all up, quite happy with how the reference was turned into, or how I turned it into the actual piece. But I did like the expression on her face in this photo. She looked like she was up to mischief, and that seemed perfect for this feeling of revelry and Dionysus kind of inviting you into his world, if you like. And yeah, the autumnal colours, of course, feel very appropriate at the moment. Even though here in New Zealand it's spring, I have been so enjoying all the autumnal stuff on Instagram, and I just live for this aesthetic. I could happily live in autumn all year round. So that seemed just very fitting for this one. So I'm using a variety of pens and things here as well. The Copic markers, as you saw before, and this is the Pentel brush pen, which I use alongside fine liners for the line work in a lot of these. I didn't actually use any black liquid ink in this. I used Copic markers, a black Copic marker, to go around all the black bits around the outside, which you'll see in a minute. Decided here to make his robe, or his chiton, or his toga, if you like, make it wine red. That seemed, again, quite appropriate. I sort of thought, well, that would be quite practical for him as well, because he's doing all this revelry, and he probably is going to be spilling some on himself at some point. So let's make it practical and not make it white, because that would be a bit daft, if you ask me. As you can see here, I've working on this at a different time of day. I think the sun was just going down, so we had some very lovely warm colours across the page. It sort of gives you a sense of time as well. So yeah, here I'm using, as I said, a black Copic marker, and what I like about this is it's very easy to fill in a lot of space quite quickly, but also you can get those finer details, which I always struggle with a brush. Even if I've got a good quality small paintbrush, it can be difficult to get those very fine lines. And the trouble, of course, with using a combination of the liquid ink and these fine liners is that they're a different type of black. One comes out a lot darker, and same with the Pentel brush pen, it doesn't come out that dark. So you end up with sort of blotchy bits, which I found with the Medusa piece a bit, which was frustrating. But this ends up with quite a flat colour, and because I wasn't using a lot of liquid, the page didn't buckle either, which is nice. You'll see in the piece I do tomorrow that there was quite a bit of page buckling happening, which is not ideal. Oh, and the light has changed again. For a bit of a change here, I decided to use a white ink to go in and do the details, just because I felt it was going to be a bit too much to do gold. I know, it's shocking. I love using gold, and I probably overuse it, if that's possible. But I thought in terms of bringing the whole piece together, using gold just to highlight the main part, which was sort of his head and the halo around his head, and use white in these other bits would actually work quite well. And that actually was pretty successful, I think. It gives it quite a different feel to the other pieces, and it did mean that it took quite a bit longer than some of the other pieces. But Inktober is about experimenting with different inking techniques, as well as, being part of a community and all the rest of it. But this is what I'm most enjoying about Inktober, is exploring slightly different ways of doing things and exploring ways of depicting the human form. And I know there hasn't been a huge amount of variety in what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm learning things each time and just adding little extra touches in places, and that maybe not each one is better than the last one, although that's always my goal, but in general the trajectory is a sense of improvement. So let's hope that continues. Yeah, I'm certainly feeling that. I'm trying to think of individual stories about Dionysus now, and off the top of my head I can't think of any. I just sort of think of more general stories about Dionysus and the satyrs and the Maenads, and I think of the secret history as well, and the sort of stories of dark academia that are based on this idea of revelry and sort of a history of ancient Greece. And Dionysus is sort of the opposite of what Apollo stands for, and that's something that often comes up in sort of academia and in literature, is the idea of of Dionysus versus Apollo. So Apollonian versus Dionystic? Don't think that's quite right. But whatever the version of that word is, it's sort of the idea of with Dionysus, it's a sense of letting go of reality and of reason. So Apollo's very much about reason and logic and using your brain, and Dionysus is about letting go of all of that. And that's something that definitely gets explored in the secret history a lot. You've got these very brainy classic students who are always using their minds. That's kind of their main thing. But then it is also to do with how they sort of express themselves in a Dionystic way. And that's probably about as much as I can say without giving stuff away in that story. But that's what I find kind of interesting, and I think that maybe having a balance of those two things is quite important, because Apollo also represents creativity, but I think a part of creativity is also in kind of letting go of logic and reason and kind of going with the flow a bit and experimenting and not always doing stuff by the book. So in some ways Dionysus represents that as well, which is super interesting. But what the ancient Greeks thought is that you needed a balance of both of these things to be, a properly functioning human, and that to be too much like Apollo was to sort of lose yourself in reason, and to be too much like Dionysus was to lose yourself in revelry and the pleasures of the world. So yeah, I've always found that quite interesting, and it's something that you do see across literature. And yeah, not sure what else I can say about that, but when I think about Dionysus, that's what I think of. I think about what he represents in opposition to Apollo, and I guess it's sort of head over heart as well. Slightly different, but anyway, I'm going back to this line work and just adding in a little bit more around the grapes and things. And here I decided that the gold was kind of getting lost in the writing down the bottom, so I went over it in white. It still gets a little bit lost in the busyness of the whole piece, and in some ways it might have been more successful without having the text there at all. But I am trying to include text in most of them. There have been a few where I haven't, so Demeter didn't have any text, and I think that was probably a good decision, so maybe I should have done that with this. But, apart from that, I'm actually really pleased with how this turned out. After I finished this, I actually went back in and made his lips redder, made them kind of look wine-stained, which seemed appropriate. But yeah, here his lips looking just a little bit pale. I didn't want him to look like he was wearing lipstick, though. That's the kind of the challenge with drawing men, I find, is that you don't want to, you want to make their mouths dark enough that they stand out. And it's very easy to do that with a woman because you just make their lips darker and it looks like they're wearing lipstick. But yeah, when you're drawing a man, it's a bit harder because you don't want them to look too feminine. Not that that's too much of an issue here, but you still want, if you want to define them as male rather than female, then the lips are one of the main ways to do that. I'm perfectly happy having pretty androgynous looking characters, but yeah, in this case I didn't want him to look too clownish either. But I think it worked. We'll just assume that he has wine in his goblet, which would make sense, and that he's drinking it and spilling it all over his toga or chiton. Anyway, that was Dionysus. I hope you enjoyed me talking a little bit about the philosophy behind Dionysus and Apollo, and I'm sorry if you know more about this and I've completely butchered it. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. There isn't a lot that I would change if I did it again, which is always a good sign. So I'll sign off for now. Tomorrow we've got Orpheus and Eurydice, and I know, yes, we've got Orpheus again, but this is in a different way, so it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Alright, I will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching, and follow me over on Instagram if you want to see sort of the updates as they come through of Inktober stuff, and I post more of what I'm planning to do with these over on there. So yeah, see you over there and see you tomorrow. Bye.